guests today are Marty Depuis, and Sean Snaith. We join their conversation in the faculty lounge.
The work that we do impacts people, how we can share that work with our students, as well as continue those relationships with people across the globe. And that kind of understanding really is, I think, key again to...
How many students will participate in that?
It'll be small, it'll be about 16 to 20 students will go. Okay. And the idea is, and I think this is a new way of thinking about study abroad, is we'll do it during summer session A. So we'll have about 3 weeks on campus where students will do background reading. There's a number of faculty at UCF who have expertise or some research interest in the Caribbean region, whether it be literature or economics or political science or history. So we'll draw hopefully on their expertise, have students really be prepared before they go to a new country, and then spend about 2 weeks in St. Kitts itself. And there they'll get an overview of culture, history, politics, economics, and then have some time for doing directed research in their major. So we're even developing a program with, for pre-med students, which a lot of times pre-med students don't have a chance to study abroad because their curriculum is so demanding. But we're looking at talking to the hospital there and some of the clinics there. Some of our faculty at UCF have actually experience teaching in institutions in St. Kitts.
Oh, wow.
So we're really trying to develop a program that will meet the needs of all students, give them a general overview of the country, allow them to do directed research in their major, and also then do some community service or service learning. So we think, again, it's important to give back to the places we study and use as case sites. And so we'll do about 2 days of either work in the environmental area or in archiving, cultural area. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Then we'll have another week when students get back to finish up the research and then share the research with each other. So it's very interdisciplinary in nature. Right. It's short enough where a lot of students can take advantage of it. It keeps expenses down for so many of our students that have, comprehensive curriculums. They can't get out of sequence for a semester.
Right.
So I think this kind of study abroad is maybe another way of getting students to see the world from a different perspective and to experience the world.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting approach, and I think it does open up the opportunity to more people who can't get away for a full year or for even a full semester to get that experience that I think is invaluable. Really, I mean, you learn so much by being in another country, in another culture, in another way of life, and you've traveled pretty extensively yourself, and I think you probably agree. I mean, when it comes to best ways to spend your money, I think education's one, and the other is travel, because you take so much with you, and you always have that experience, and it leaves its mark on you really indelibly, and it's enriching.
Absolutely, and that's study and education, or if you can combine the two together and do some of the UCF's travel and study abroad programs, it's really incredible opportunity. I was lucky. I guess a very strong believer in combining these two and taking advantage of these opportunities. I studied in the city of Oxford when I was an undergraduate, and then as a law student I was able to study in the People's Republic of China, the Soviet Union, King's College in London, and also in Poland. So actually, I can tell, once I was in law school, I realized that practicing law wasn't for me, really. But the academic pursuit of law and legal inquiry was very interesting. Since I wasn't going to practice, I could study legal systems around the world and really go and experience the people and the culture and the politics and legal systems of communist countries, socialist countries, and all sorts of different perspectives on international trade. And then you learn so much about yourself too. You can start to question some of the things that you grow up believing are just always true. Thinking about your government in different ways, thinking about, again, what enriches your life in different ways, and trying different foods and hearing different music and meeting, especially if you're a student, meeting young people who can really, bond easily, and they're eager to share their hometown with you, their nation with you. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. What as you travel around the world, do you find, while the cultures vary greatly, and the foods certainly do, and the architecture and the geography, were there common threads that you could, if you put push pins on a map of all the places you've been, and could you wrap your arm around all those and say, this was true, whether it was in the former Soviet Union, or whether it was in England, or whether it was in China or South America and some of the other places that you've been, or the Caribbean? What's universal?
Absolutely. When you think about some of the conflict that we hear on the news about, and we hear about civil unrest and war across the globe, and it's certainly devastating. It's a terrible tragedy for humanity to have this kind of aggression and genocide. But when you think of, too, that most of the time we are united as a human species. We share the joy of our families. We share the the desire to have fun, and that could be through dance. And in Mexico they may dance a certain way, and in Russia they dance a slightly different way. But we enjoy music and art and culture and sports and our families and our friends and food and being together. And that's the kind of thing that celebrating life. And we see that everywhere you go, and even in war-torn countries you see a real innate desire to celebrate life, and even in the most challenging conditions. I'm pretty lucky. I'm going to go to Croatia in July, and as you know, the Balkan region has centuries of conflict and ethnic conflict, religious conflicts. It's where East and West have met. But yet it's a beautiful country. I was there in the 80s and looking forward to returning, and it was difficult to travel there in the 90s because of the war.
Right.
But now it's become, again, a place that people are really looking forward to returning to. And
is this a pleasure trip?
It is. It's vacation.
Good.
Yeah.
What's that?
Right. So I'm really lucky. It's a vacation that I've been planning. We were going to sail from Split, which is on the Adriatic Sea, down to Dubrovnik. Okay. And Dubrovnik's a medieval city. It's just stunning scenery, and lots of barrier islands off the coast of Croatia there, and it's just on the other side of Italy. So just beautiful, and not as overrun by tourists yet. That's the key, I think, to some of these programs, is avoiding the tourist path. That's we talk about travel. If you're in Paris, is a beautiful city. Chicago is a world-class city. But cities have certain similarities that they share: density, certain core attributes. You get out to the more remote locations and the less discovered villages, I think you really get a chance to see different aspects of life.
Yeah. Well, and the culture's not as watered down and pre-prepared for the tourist and wrapped in cellophane. It's it's kind of as it is.
Sanitized.
Sanitized,
culture,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, storefront culture.
Right.
So I think you're right on that, and that's I've always enjoyed when I travel, just trying to when I can get off the beaten path and see what it's like out there.
And you've had quite a few interesting experiences abroad. You were faculty at the American University in Cairo?
I did. When I first got out of graduate school, I spent 2 years at AUC, as it was called, American University in Cairo, and that was a really interesting experience for me to just see that part of the world, of course. I mean, the history, millennia of history, and then politically the way it is today, and the problems, and also just to gain, as you said, perspective on myself and our country, and how the rest of the world operates, and what they think of us and what their lives are like. I mean, we take our day-to-day life, I think, for granted here in the U.S., and that was one of the real eye-openers. I grew up in a family that didn't have much in terms of means, and was pretty poor off. But in context, gee, I was actually, living like a king. I mean, I had a house to live in and food to eat, and I went to the doctor when I was sick. And so it's very, again, it's an experience, it's an education. And I said to my students many times during the 2 years I was there, I'm learning far more than I'm teaching here. I mean, I'm taking away much more than I've left in the classroom, and it's a marvelous, it just is a marvelous experience, and it is something that that I'll always have and I'll always remember. I was very glad that I was able to do that before children and mortgages and other ties that bind, kind of limit the ability to do that. Right. And I found the same thing. I mean, people are people, and the Mideast, from what I'd seen in the media, was this dangerous place filled with hatred towards Americans, and that wasn't the place that I visited, and these weren't the people that were shown on the nightly news. These were people that would just offer me to join them for lunch as I passed them by on the street, or that my first day in Egypt. I'll relay this, and then I want to ask you some questions. I was in an apartment in Garden City, which is right in the heart of Egypt, about a block from the Nile, and I thought, I'm going to go see the Nile River. And so I walked down, and there was a guy fishing, and I like to fish. I was just watching, I'm like, I wonder what he's catching and stuff. And he just waved me down and handed me his fishing pole, and was instructing me how to fish. So I just let him do that. And then he walked, and he went away, and about 20 minutes later he came back with a pole for himself to fish.
Did you catch anything?
I did catch some of these Nile perch. I wouldn't eat anything coming out of that part of the Nile. In the south of Egypt, the Nile's very blue and clean, but all the runoff by the time it gets to Cairo, no thanks. But another issue that you've been involved in, and that I think is certainly very pertinent, and one that we're going to deal with as a country, as a culture, as a society, as a government, is civil unions or same-sex marriage. You've written a book that was based on your dissertation?
Right, yes. Okay. Yeah, I looked at, I have my PhD from the University of Southern California and my law degree from the American University. So my research and interests have tried to combine law and politics, and looking at how law shapes politics and shapes society. As I mentioned, being a lawyer was not so great for me, but studying law was fascinating. So I look at, and I was in grad school in 1991 when the first same-sex marriage case was being litigated in Hawaii. I said, this is really an interesting political and legal phenomenon for a number of reasons. First, that 6 people in Hawaii decide to sue for marriage rights. 6 gay and lesbian people decide to sue for marriage rights. And who would have thought they would have won? And that's kind of unique to American politics, I think, is that we have this sense of individual rights. And it's certainly ingrained in our founding. It makes us somewhat unique than other countries in terms of our understanding of our relationship between the citizen and the state. So you've got these 6 wackos in Hawaii because they think they are experiencing an injustice in their own mind, and they're going to sue to correct it. But nobody thought they would win. The ACLU, all the lefty, legal organizations, all the gay and lesbian legal organizations wouldn't touch the case. Oh. They said this is a losing proposition. They encouraged them not to sue because bad precedent is always harder to overcome than no precedent.
What time period?
91.
91.
Right.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
So, go
ahead. But against all odds, they prevail. And that sets in motion now a legal and political and social discussion that's been going on for a decade and a half, and it will continue to go on for the foreseeable future. And so it's interesting how these people, with their sense of entitlement, rights entitlement, have helped set in motion this whole debate about extended families, how we define families in society. And then once the plaintiffs won in Hawaii, then you saw other grassroots mobilization being done, education, outreach to faith-based communities, a whole educational process. Every state in the country now has just debated civil unions or same-sex marriage at least once. And so in terms of political capital, it's been very time-consuming. It's just absorbed a lot of politics. And you see the debate still going on in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party about how to address families of gay and lesbian people. And so it was a very interesting case study of looking at how law and how certain court cases can change politics, can change society. And we see other examples in the United States and across the world, but certainly in the United States, the Dred Scott case, Brown versus Board of Education. So I'm interested in how law and politics and social institutions all relate to each other.
I mean, do you find that they move neck and neck, or does one lead the other, or do they have to? I mean, are they bound together that they have to inch together, basically simultaneously, or?
I think you're right. I think it's social change, no matter what the issue, is most effective when it's incremental. We certainly, again, look at Brown versus Board of Education, which desegregated the schools. There was incredible political backlash to that decision. And slowly but surely, the federal government came around and mandated, through funding of schools, change, and mandated often in some systems busing. So the legal system, even though we have a sense of rights, sometimes isn't the best vehicle for social change. We see the backlash to litigation sometimes can really be powerful. The abortion issue, some of the most contentious issues in society, there's often parallel tracks between litigation and legislation, and also education and social change. Obviously, I'm a constitutional law scholar, so some of you can tell I get excited about some of these issues. But the most cutting issues of the day, I think, you can look at how the legal, political, and social systems shape each other, and how that shapes an individual's understanding of it. Physician-assisted suicide, some of these issues of privacy, again, in a relationship from the state to the citizen, are really being hashed out today in very emotional terms sometimes, in very heated terms. And both sides of most of these debates tend to be very passionate about their position. Finding middle ground is often difficult.
What's interesting is we call it Terry Schiavo.
Yes.
That was here in Florida, and there was a very violent backlash because there were politicians that were getting involved in this, and this is one of those moral issues.
Right.
As you talked about assisted suicide, or whether it's abortion or whether it's gay marriage. One of these, there's moral dimension to this, but the state tried to kind of get involved in that, and
Congress as well.
Exactly. But I think it backfired.
I
think this is one of those situations where it wasn't time for the law to be involved in that. That's too that's too sensitive. I mean, with civil unions, there are some real legal property rights issues and end of life decisions. And you said just the redefinition of family. If you've got a gay couple and they have children, and one wants to not work and take care of the new child, but do the health benefits transfer to the same-sex spouse? What happens if one's in an accident and some difficult decision has to be made?
Exactly.
To me, that transcends whatever your moral beliefs are, or religious beliefs about their arrangement. I mean, these people are, they deserve the right, to make these kind of decisions. So, I think we're making progress on that front, and I wonder if someday we'll look back at that case in Hawaii, like we do, the Board of Education decision, and just be like, wow, did we really have to go through that to get to this phase? I mean, do you think that's going to be there? Do you think it'll be like abortion, almost always controversial and teetering on changing legislatively or legally based on the composition of the Supreme Court? I mean, that's
a huge factor too, isn't it? The composition of these courts, and people that are now litigating for same-sex family recognition are being more strategic and trying to recognize what jurisdictions. It's not a coincidence that Massachusetts, which has been known, despite Governor Romney, which is known to have a liberal political base. Same with Vermont, and that's the thing. Again, when you look at the strategy of law and politics, that people are much more aware of when to take a case to the courts or when not to. When, is the educational work being done in churches and temples and synagogues before we ask for a court case? And I think the history of this country does reflect a movement towards equality for all people. And it's not a perfect track record by any stretch of the imagination, but we do see a movement towards recognizing religious diversity. Certainly some faiths will not want to recognize gay and lesbian families, but there are many other faiths that are recognizing them in terms of blessing those relationships. And then also the institution of marriage doesn't have to be a sacred institution. So separating a societal institution that's got such deep roots in religion and in culture is very challenging.
Well, one of the things I thought of with the whole gay marriage issue is once you start talking about marriage, well, sadly, the other thing you have to consider is divorce, and how will those, how do family courts handle those situations, and is it the same set of rules and laws, or because you've got typically the father and the mother, and who gets custody, but if you got the same sex,
right,
the person that was in the mother role, staying at home perhaps, did they have a greater claim to the children than the spouse that was working to support? It's
very complicated. And to separate that out is almost sometimes beyond the legal system. It's just, unless if you can make, if you have a family that has two women and one of them bore the child herself, she's the biological mother, but then the other partner has raised the child, and divorce does happen. It happens a lot. I think the divorce rate for marriage is 50% now, I think, across the country. And it happens, of course, in same-sex relationships as well. Does a family that's recognized in Vermont or Massachusetts or I think now New Jersey get dissolved in Florida or in another state that doesn't recognize those unions? So it's a very complex issue, and which makes it a very interesting case study for all these reasons. And another aspect that I look at is how do other societies and governments address this? If you look at the Scandinavian countries, they've accepted same-sex marriage mostly through the legislative process rather than the court system. And so our decisions that are made by our representatives more legitimate or more acceptable because they are made by our representatives. And we're seeing that even in the United States now, where civil unions or same-sex marriages are being recognized by democratically elected governments rather than courts who may be appointed or may not have the accountability to the people that we feel is important in a democracy. Well,
since this is an issue that you follow, how has the private sector handled this issue? Have they been ahead of the game? Because do you want to risk losing the best employee because she's a lesbian and wants to have her benefits cover her partner, or did they kind of step up first? I mean, in your studies, what?
Well, that's very interesting because actually the Fortune 500, the top industries in America, were ahead of this before the same-sex marriage case in 1991 even. You saw many companies, Disney, a lot of companies were recognizing are extending domestic partnership benefits to all their employees before it even became a governmental issue. So it's very interesting. Sometimes the private sector will lead, as you well know, and in society changes, governments change after some of these economic engines.
But these two things are not unrelated, because if you're heterosexual, your boyfriend or girlfriend aren't eligible for your benefits because you're not married. You don't have this legal binding. Once you get married, then they become. So what happens? How do they handle that situation where you've got are they married or are they just boyfriend and boyfriend? that may not be a permanent.
For some domestic partnership benefits, there had to be, before a company would extend them, there'd have to be sort of some kind of recognition of declared family unit. So it couldn't be just two people that are casually acquainted becoming a domestic partnership. So it depends really on the benefits that are being addressed, as well as who's giving them. But you do see a lot of companies, Disney, and there's been discussion in this region about how welcoming it is. And Orange County government recently, and I think Orlando government recently, have extended domestic partnership benefits or non-discrimination provisions based on sexual orientation, because Central Florida does want to be a welcoming place and draw in the best talent and not lose great workers because of not being able to provide for a person's spouse.
Now there was and it's like many things, this, eluding me, I can't recall, but there was a city manager in Florida, or county manager, that was a transgender person, and you know, that wasn't covered under the benefits, and I don't remember how that all played out. I believe that he went through the process and to become a woman, but I don't know if he lost his job over it. But there was, I mean, that's even you know, maybe a step beyond the same-sex marriage in a lot of people's eyes. But
sure, it's just, you know, it's certainly issues of individual equality, individual dignity and identity are, again, part of the American tradition, but how they play out is very contested. And so I think that person was actually offered a job in another Florida city as a woman. I think this person was a man when he started his job as the city manager, and then decided that he was better himself as a woman, better person as a woman, or chose that was his gender identification. And another city in Florida found his credentials and his merit to be worthy of employment. So it's very interesting, and there certainly was another case that got a lot of publicity. Right. And that's a whole nother area, you know, of issues that face the state, face Central Florida, face the nation regarding how we recognize people. Immigration's another issue that affects our state so directly, and yet the country's embroiled in a big debate about immigration.